cost of living here in Vancouver, I'm finding it hard for my business to attract the top talent and still be able to work within my hiring budget. So how do you work with both of those two dynamics?
Define top talent. Like what does that mean?
People who are, like, let's say they already have a really good resume, why would they want to move to a place where their dollar doesn't go as far? You know, I had an American person interested in working for me, but I had to tell them, like, number one, the cost of living is way higher, and number two, you're losing on the exchange. So, like, how do you attract those people?
Well, you definitely don't say that. You have to sell them on why you exist. You have to sell them about your culture. You need to sell them about your 10 to 30-year goal. So they want so badly to be a part of what you're creating that they don't care about what you're going to pay them and where, you know, they're going to love Vancouver. And you have to get them excited about what you're going to do. And to find top talent, the definition of that is someone who fits into your culture, who is a high performer that fits within what you can afford. That's an A player. So those are the things that actually really, really matter. And you got to think Whistler is probably at another level, but we still attract people from around the world to come to work with our organization at Whistler.
I'll add one thing to that. So I think, culture and values is so important. So when we're recruiting for, say, bucket list, the first question we ask is, what is on your bucket list? And the second is, like, why do you want to work here? And every time we've heard from the development staff, it's because, like, you know, I want to serve a bigger purpose. I want to help. I want to give back. And the first time I heard it, I'm like, that's cool. Like, you could be a good fit. But then I heard it again and again and again. And it's like, it's awesome. And then the second thing I'd recommend, we have a remote team. All our dev staff for Bucket List is remote. We have one fella in Pakistan, and the rest are Canadian. And so we found people, if they're willing to work remotely, that they're often willing to take a smaller salary and for that freedom. And if they're working for a great, core value or a great cultural organization, that you don't have to pay them like a ridiculous amount. And it's weird. So we got, just as a quick anecdote to that, I got pitched by an organization that helps people from Africa, developers, software developers, engineers from Africa, find employment around the world. And this employment firm took a small cut. And I was like, well, how much do you charge? And he's like, well, we charge around $30 per hour. I'm like, we're getting Canadians for $30 an hour that's remote. I'm like, so weirdly, with a Canadian dollar kind of being depressed, and people wanting to work for great cultural organizations, you can find awesome people locally. And not to get too granular here, but there's a great website called We Work Remotely where we get a huge number of applicants from. So anyways, and that's how we've hired good quality, great staff and stuff.
The one thing I would say, so of all the people that we hired 10. Like 10 people had had the great resume for exactly what we were looking for, just as a starting point. So we hire based on cultural fit, number one. Number two is intelligence. And the gauge of intelligence it's really the ability to learn and absorb knowledge. And it's not whether or not it takes someone some people have to work really, really hard to get knowledge, and some people it just comes naturally. Intelligence is intelligence. It's the outcome. And the last thing we look for is relevant skills. And if we're at the skills level, if we're saying, oh, well, they really have the skills, we really shouldn't bring that candidate on. And so the thing is, I think a strong strategy on how you're going to build people, great people, into great productive employees is a first starting point there. The other one is, I think it's also important to acknowledge, well, what everyone's talking around, let's say the costs, right? The whole cost side of things. Salary doesn't matter so long as you meet the relevant needs of the individual. So if you're fair, right? So we're not saying let's pay bottom dollar, but you're equitable and you're fair in how you pay people. They feel respected and they're able to sustain a reasonable lifestyle. That is now into the number 6 in terms of the rank. What's number 1? Well, it's an enjoyable workplace. And so I think it's just, there's a minimum, of course. But I think and the minimum should be very reasonable. But I think the other one is just people want their work to be relevant to their lives. It's all one thing now, right? It's not like I don't go and clean out the inside of an incinerator, maybe get cancer, and then get to go home and play with my kids. Like, it's all one thing. People expect you to treat them, in their home life and their work life as the same. So I think those are the things that can really change the paradigm for you.
Good question.
That's an excellent question. So back to the scale-up question, which is, what have been your own biggest challenges scaling up a company, especially if it wasn't planned in the first place?
Well, I'll tell you mine. I said it earlier. My biggest challenge of the time was accountability. And that sort of sounds ridiculous. But my coach of the time actually told me as CEO, I was a terrible delegator. And I was like, really? Because I don't even think I should be delegating, being like, that doesn't make even sense. And handed me 2 more books, right, to read on delegation, and I'd already read them, so I read them again and still thought that wasn't the right thing to do. And so the toughest thing for me, because I would always let someone off the hook one-on-one, was to create peer accountability, right? And peer accountability to scale an organization allowed everybody to grow, right? Everyone to own where we were going. And my role, which was one of the hardest things, was just to help drive where we were going and let everyone else build how we're going to get there. And being sort of, coming from got to do everything to now, okay, this is what I do. I drive where we're going, and everyone else will bring along, here's how we're going to get here. That drove the accountability. And once I figured that out, and once I saw all the examples I lived through in all the other teams I played on in sports, I was like, duh, of course. And to create that framework, that rhythm to drive the accountable behavior was key. But it was hard to find it.
I bet. And I think that's why those key people are that much more important, because there's a level of trust you have to have if you're going to do that.
Yeah, trust, and then ensure there's, trust to have the healthy dialogue, to commit to where we're going, to commit to the goals, and then of course to deliver the team goal. And it's about the team goal, not the individual goal.
For us, like what we're finding is probably just getting the right people at the right time. So in that Vern Harnish book, which is an awesome book, they talk about from 0 to a million, there's like, it's I think 97 or 96% of businesses fail to make it to the first million. Yeah. And then from 1 to 10 million, there's another like death curve where people fail to make it. And from 10 to 100, it happens again. And like oftentimes the person or people who get you to a million may not get you to 10 or 100. Now that's not an exclusive rule. I love reading, and I just read the Shoe Dog book by Phil Knight. He's a founder of Nike. So he hired a bunch of people, and like he was selling shoes out of the back of his car, and they later on became senior executives at his company. So people can scale with you. But in my experience, we've had some true A players who are just crushing it, and then we've had some people who've kind of stalled in their growth where we can't keep promoting them up to keep leading our organization. So specifically in one of my companies, I realized we need to hire in a couple of key senior executive people to help us maintain momentum and growth inside of our organization. So for us, this has been getting the right people on board. So that's been my barrier.
So for me, let's see, how would I put it? How to remain authentic to yourself when through the scale of the business, because it certainly is a big evolution. And I think one of the things it wasn't intentional. There are some things that were intentional in terms of the scale of the business, and hopefully more and more is getting intentional. One of the lucky things I stumbled upon was I have always had a tremendous appreciation for people that have a different perspective than that of my own, which is actually fairly unusual for an early stage entrepreneur. Most early stage entrepreneurs hire in their model, so they hire slaves. And so I brought on a bunch of people, and I'm like, oh, I have no idea how you even think. Will you please join me? And I would, there's still people out there that I just, every time I see them, like, poke. Maybe one day, we're lucky enough to work together. And so I think what's been great about that is different individuals that join the company have actually almost risen through leadership and had a real impact in changing all of us at different phases. And and there's such diversity within, let's say, the leadership team at Traction, but there's a common set of values, and I think it's just there's nobody that has the same why as me. Like, I'm totally drawn and attracted to pragmatists and people that are just methodical in their approach, or just who love to just understand something to the perfect model. And for anyone who knows me, there's zero of those. I certainly really respect it, but those are not things that are fortes for me, nor will they probably ever be. So it was stumbling into just, you know, surrounding yourself with fascinating people that are different than me, and then really respecting and not trying to absorb them, but to embrace them.
All right, well, that's fantastic advice. That's almost a teachable moment. When you start hearing your own opinion back to you and everyone thinks like you, you're in the wrong room. You should probably stop hiring like that. And when you're hearing yes all the time, it is probably also a bad thing. What was the biggest yes, I did it moment as far as scaling up goes?
I would say from my perspective, it was the second time. The first time, was it fluky? Was it we had, you know, we did have the right people by that point, and we, you know, got it to what our goal was. The second time, when we set out to not build a company that would be around here for a long time, but we actually set out to build as big as we possibly could, and take the technology to somewhere else so it would be as big as it possibly could be without us. And we were looking for liquidity, and being able to prove the framework worked a second time, and actually that was the third time, and then we did it a fourth time. Those, each time we actually proved that the framework worked, is why I do what I do today. It's just, there's huge value in it. It's easy to implement, and you just need the discipline to keep up the rhythm of it.
Okay.
One of the biggest ones lately, a bunch of spouses are starting to join Traction. And you're like, well, wait, Malpass, why is that relevant? Well, people are investing their full family's well-being into our business. Husbands and wives working together. And I would say that's community to me. And so that's always been something like we've talked about, and there have been a couple people that of course, they work with their spouses, but like it's actually becoming a thing. And also we're starting to see parents and kids also with some, so like those are like full, more meaningful family. So those are like, yeah, those are the ones that really kind of stick with me.
Wow. How to follow that, Jason?
So it's good. I was third in line. I got to think about that, right? So. No, but so for me, what's been recently the most exciting thing is so at Advisor Websites we're actually now at 40 people, and we've been grooming like the next layer of management to take over for my business partner and I, and we're going to be like kind of sit on our own board of advisors. And like what I was seeing, so we do a weekly meeting called Huddle. I stole it from Greg. The whole concept of the meeting. So it's a company-wide meeting where you get everybody together, you create excitement inside of your organization. And we have one of our leaders, a guy named Alex, and he got up and he ran the meeting, and he did like an amazing job, like just knocked it out of the park. So he did a better job than either my business partner or I now do. And it was so cool watching that next layer of leadership, like really stepping up and doing a good job. And it was just like deeply rewarding to know that you can just get out of the way and let it happen sometimes. So that's been probably my favorite moment recently.